Our very special guest, Mr. Wayne May, is our special guest today for Coffee and Conversation. Trust everyone is ready to give a listening ear. Very excited to hear his story, whatever he decides to share with us. I have a seat for you up here.
No, I'll stand.
Okay.
I'll stand. I can talk better.
Would you like a mic?
Yes.
Would you like the microphone? So everyone can hear you
Do
well?
I need a microphone?
Yes.
I guess I do. I sound better to myself than I do anybody else. But I feel very humble to be asked to do this. I have one word that I've tried to apply to myself and to others. That word is willing. I know that word has gotten to me in a lot of projects. But when I was asked to do this, I had hesitated as to whether I would do it, because there's one thing about me, I don't like to talk about myself. But here I am. So here we go. I did make some notes, obviously, but I'll try not to read them. So this today is introduced as my life presented to the Greenway Square on this date. And so you're going to have to take a while, because I have 94 years to go back on. But anyhow, I'm going to start out with my journey going back to Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Can you hear me okay? Have I got my mic up okay? I was born in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. My mother and father lived there. All my relatives, my father's side of the family lived there. My mother's side of the family lived there. And back in those days, they used to have family get-togethers. And we had a wonderful, wonderful family. And we used to go back there and my aunts and uncles used to they had one of the older houses with what they called them duplexes, with their 3-story high. They had a pantry and a parlor and everything, and we used to go back there, and my aunts and uncles and my aunts and my grandmother, they just made all kinds of pies and stuff. And it was such an awesome time to go and do that. And I'm the youngest of 4 boys. 2 of my brothers have passed away. Some of you met my next to the oldest brother, Donald, when he was here in September. He's 97 and he's still moving. In fact, he just flew in from Pennsylvania to Oregon to be with his daughter. And we moved, when I was about 2 years old, we moved from Johnstown to Cleveland, Ohio. And my folks bought a 7-acre facility outside of between Cleveland and Akron. And unless you're familiar, I know Larry, you're from Cleveland, but unless you're familiar with the area, you probably don't know where Richfield is. It's about halfway between Cleveland and Akron, and you may not even know where Akron is. Akron was known for the Goodyear Goodrich tires. That's where they originally manufactured the tires. And so we lived there. My mother and father bought a 7-acre piece of property. And on the corner of that property, they had an old clubhouse that had been abandoned for a long time. So that was our place where we lived. My mother and father's bed was on the stage, and us 4 boys, our bed was on the main level. And I know you'd probably, none of you are as old as I am, so obviously you don't remember. We didn't have king-size beds, we didn't have queen-size beds, but we had 4 brothers to sleep, and we slept all in the same bed. 2 of us would head to the head, and 2 of us would go the other way, and you never know which way we were turned, but we survived. We survived. That's the way it was. And so, as I mentioned, we went from Cleveland, and then in 1945, I was the only one left as a teenager. We moved to San Diego, actually Pasadena, California. In fact, we were going through the area of Boston, or Barstow, California, the day that Roosevelt had passed away. And my 3 brothers were in the They joined the Navy during the World War II. I was 1 year or too early, too young to do that. So when I turned 18, I joined the Army. And at that time, they didn't have they only had the Army, they didn't have a U.S. Air Force. And then sometime later, they split the two, and now they have the Army and the U.S. Air Force, and I was transferred into the Air Force. Some of my transfers, I ended up in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And my parents have taken me to church, all four of us boys took us to church from the very beginning of our birth. And we were taught the Bible. We were taught about what the Bible says from cover to cover. And they told us about Jesus Christ as our Savior. And the way to heaven is through Jesus Christ as our Savior. And I know there's some of you sitting here today that I have different religions, different beliefs, and I respect that, and I don't want to offend anybody, but I was told to give my story, and that's my story. We were very involved in the churches. We went to a church called Grace Brethren, and when we were living in the Cleveland area, they had a Grace Brethren church in Cleveland. So we traveled back and forth for a while, and then we moved to Cleveland. And then, as I mentioned, I was in Cheyenne, and while I was in Cheyenne, right after I arrived, I called the pastor at the church. And I said, "What time is your service tomorrow?" So he told me, and immediately after he getting on the phone, he calls a young lady by the name of Phyllis and her mother. And he told Phyllis, he said, "There's this guy that just got transferred into Charlotte, and he's coming to church tomorrow." So she told him, she said, "If I like what I see, I'll give you a nudge and invite him over for dinner with us all on Sunday." And so I don't know what she saw, but anyhow, she nudged him, and we had dinner that Sunday. That dinner turned into be a 57-year marriage. And I was very blessed with that. Phyllis gave me 2 children, a daughter, Cindy, and a son. In fact, while we were sitting in there a while ago, John called. He lives in Orlando, Florida. He calls me about every week to keep in touch with me as to what's going on. And I'm not going to read these things, and but I do need to have some way of following something here. When I was a very young person and I was in grade school, they call it mid-school nowadays, I had an interest to do woodworking. And so I took a woodworking class there at the school. Well, our teacher, he didn't teach you how to use power equipment. He taught you how to do it by hand. So we would glue some boards together, and you take a block of wood and a sandpaper, you sand it down to the finish that you want. So my project I selected was a hope chest. And so I started on that hope chest. Of course, my semester wasn't long enough to be able to finish that hope chest. So ultimately in time, I got finished, and I sent it, we were living in San Diego. I had it shipped back to Cindy, and I believe Alicia, my granddaughter, has it in her bedroom now. And so that was my first project. And my folks were very kind to me, very kind to our 4 boys, but they were very disciplinary. And they used to give us what they call the paddle of understanding. And sometimes we wondered how understanding it was, because they always said they were doing it in love. And we kind of questioned sometimes how that love was. But I have to confess that what the discipline that gave us worked. We passed that on to Cindy and John, and from Cindy and John onto their family. And now I have 4 great grandchildren living in the area, and their parents are doing the same thing. So we have a blessed family, and I'm so thankful for it. when we went to Johnstown, and one of the purposes that we went to Johnstown from Cleveland was to get together with a family. And as I mentioned a while ago, one of our projects, there's interest in going to Johnstown, was to get together with a family and play games. We were a game-playing family. I know today a lot of people don't play games. In fact, but anyhow, we did, and so we really enjoyed that a lot. One of my, I mentioned about my woodworking. I really enjoyed woodworking. So I did a few projects along with what I was in my employment. And then when I retired, I was in the mortgage business, real estate lending business for over 30 years. And the last 5 years, a friend of mine, a guy that worked for me, kept insisting, let's go do our own, let's go do our own. I was very happy with the job. I was president of a mortgage company, subsidiary of a bank, and he kept after me. So finally I said, Ron, I said, let's take a legal size pad and write down all the things that we would have to do to start our own company. We went down to a restaurant and we took that list and wrote down the list. And after we left that, I started working on it a little bit, one after the other, getting agency approvals. We closed our own loans and then sold them off to investors. So I had to have a line of credit. I went to a bank. I got a line of credit. The bank had never ever issued a line of credit for somebody in the mortgage business that they did it. So we went on and on and on. So in December of 1985, we incorporated a mortgage operation. We call it Dollar Mortgage. And Ron was a lot younger than I was. And in 1989, I had triple bypass. And so that was kind of stunt my energy a little bit, quite a bit. So finally I felt like I couldn't keep up with him in the business, so I sold it out to him. And so then we lived in San Diego. And so I retired from the mortgage business in 1992. And I've been very blessed to have had that experience. As I mentioned, Phyllis passed away in '04, and we lived in Mooresville at the time, and we wanted something closer by. So I started looking for a house, and I wanted a ranch-style house because the one we had up in Mooresville was a two-story house. And we were heading for another subdivision, and Cindy was with me. She says, oh, they have ranch houses in this project. So we went in there. I picked a model that I liked. They only had one lot that this house would fit. And so we ended up contracting it. And of course, as you do it, if you've had a house built, you go and look at it to see how the progress is going along. And I asked the realtor, or the sales lady, I said, who's my neighbor next door? She says, oh, she's an elderly lady. And so one day when I was over checking out the construction, she was out in her yard, and I went over to introduce myself to her daughter. Her daughter's name is Lisa, and her son's name is John, and she has one other daughter, her name Linda, and they all live in Florida. John and Lisa are right now driving to Indian Land to be with us tonight and tomorrow night. They're coming here for one purpose, and that's to spend time with me. That's real love of a family. And when I met Dorothy, and back to Dorothy again, we were next door and we were getting a little acquainted. And so I said, Dorothy, why don't you go down to, let's have breakfast at IHOP, just to kind of get acquainted a little bit. So we did and had our breakfast. And after that, she told John, she says, John, I was so nervous in that car with that man that I really don't know very well. And John says, Mom, he just wants to buy you a pancake. So that ended up in marriage, and Dorothy and I got married in October of '06. and she passed away. It'll be two years next month, the 18th of April. And so it's been a lonely life. And God brought me here. As some of you know, that I'd lived in 3 other senior living places. And I was having the pleasure of sharing Greenway with some people over here at the table a while ago. And I told them, I said, save yourself a lot of work. There's only one place to live if you want to be in senior living, and that's Greenway Square. And I'm so blessed to be here. There's only one place to live if you need senior living, and this is my home, this side of heaven. I want to go back to woodworking a little bit. I really got serious in it, and I've never had any classes other than the class that I had at that school. But I have 2 projects that I really enjoyed as I was doing woodworking, and this was one of them. I picked up a plan in the Popular Mechanics magazine on this wagon. I made the first one for my grandson in 1997 when we lived in San Diego. Since then I've made 19 of them. Every grandboy has a wagon. And I'm hoping that those wagons will go on into another generation, because they're all made out of oak. They got slat sides that pull out. And the other project that I enjoyed, so I mentioned about my spiritual life. We've always been in a church that teaches the gospel, and we are now members of Calvary Church. When I was in San Diego, my pastor was David Jeremiah. And he was out speaking someplace, and he came back and introduced the church to what they call a watchman prayer ministry. Members of the church are asked to sign up 1 hour per week to pray for the ministry of the church. So I said to the pastor, what would you think if we've been in Israel and we've seen the prayer wall. I said, what would you think if I made something to represent prayer? And people would walk into the church, they'd see that this is a prayer church. And so he says, go for it. So this is the one for here at Calvary, but I made this wall that I made it for Shadow Mountain in San Diego. I got the plans and downsized the building and put it on top of my wall, but realizing that if we're praying for a church, we're not praying for just a church out in the country someplace. We're praying for, in that case, Shadow Mountain. And then when I came back here, I introduced the program to Calvary Church, John Monroe, and he said, go for it. So I made this one, and it's wrapped around one of the columns there at the church, and it probably will never be moved. So we again asked members of the church pray for the ministers of the church and the pastors 1 hour a week, and we had quite a system going on, and it worked out very well. As I said, this is still standing there and probably won't be removed. I probably missed a few things that I had on my notes, but I just want to say that is kind of taken me through my life in a short time. I've been blessed. I've been blessed to be in churches that preach the gospel. Next month we will be celebrating Easter, and Jesus is the reason for Easter. And so I'm thankful that I've been trained in that area. And as I said, I respect your positions as well. So I'd be glad to answer any questions, and I don't know whether I missed anything or not. But I've given a lot of, when I was in the mortgage business, I used to do a lot of teaching and speaking, and I used to spend hours putting my notes together. I'd give them to my wife and have her type them, and then I do just like this. I put them down and do my own. So I probably missed something in there, but I've been blessed. I'm blessed to be here. And they were asking me a while ago, I said, what is there about Greenway that you like the most? And I said, the community atmosphere. That we can sit here or come down for a breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and if there's an empty table, may I join you? Absolutely. And that's the friendship we have here, and I am so so blessed to live here, and I've said so many times to people, this is my home on this side of heaven. I'm so thankful to be here. Thank you for listening to me. I'm sure I missed some things out of my life, but this is my life, and I thank God for 94 years. I'm still moving. Any questions? Thank you very much. Together all my projects, and I'll leave it out here if anybody wants to look at it. I've been blessed to make a lot of things for families, for ministries, and so forth. I've served on a couple of, I served on the Christian Heritage College Board for 25 years, chairman of it for 12 years, and I got involved with that, so I made things for the college, I made things for the church, made things for my family, and so I have been a blessed person.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wayne. Let's give another round of applause. And I did just see on the very inside cover of this book, can I open this back up? The very inside cover, it says 14 or 15 years old. Yes, I did attend school. I thought that was very funny.
This is my picture.
Very nice.
I'll leave it here, and if you want to look at it, fine.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to know you, Mr. Wayne. So glad you're here. Does anyone have any questions?